Comanche War Culture Explained. Born in the saddle. Close your eyes and imagine the southern plains of North America 200 years ago. No fences, no roads, no towns. Just an endless ocean of grass stretching from Texas to Kansas, from New Mexico to Oklahoma. The wind never stops. The sky is so big it feels like you could fall into it. And across this sea of grass, a rider appears on the horizon. He is not tall. He is not dressed in the Hollywood feather headdress you expect. Instead, he wears a simple buckskin shirt, leggings, and moccasins. His hair is braided and wrapped in otter fur. His face is painted in black and red, and he is not sitting on his horse. He is part of his horse. He hangs off the side, one heel hooked over the horse's back, his body hidden from view. The only thing visible is his hand gripping a short bow and the arrow that is already on its way. By the time you see the rider, you are already dead. This is the Comanche, the lords of the southern plains, the greatest light cavalry the world has ever seen. They did not just ride horses. They lived on horses. They were born in the saddle, married in the saddle, and died in the saddle. A Comanche warrior could shoot 10 arrows into a man's chest while hanging upside down from a galloping horse. He could ride bareback for 100 miles without stopping, then fight a battle, then ride another 100 miles. He could track a single enemy across rock-hard ground by scent, by broken twigs, by the direction of bent grass. He could speak to his horse with nothing but his knees and a soft clicking sound. And he did all of this not because he was born with supernatural powers, but because his culture had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of mounted warfare. The Comanche war machine was so efficient, so relentless, that it stopped the Spanish Empire, humiliated the expansion of the United States for decades. Today, we are going to understand how they did it. We will strip away the myths and the movie clichés. We will enter the world of the Comanche, the children of the horse. And we will see why, for nearly 200 years, no enemy dared to follow them onto the plains. To understand Comanche war culture, you must first understand one animal, the horse. But not just any horse, the Spanish horse. In 1540, the Spanish brought horses to North America. Some escaped, others were traded. Within a generation, the Great Plains had a new species, the Mustang, hardy, fast, intelligent, and perfectly adapted to the grasslands. The Comanche were originally a branch of the Shoshone people living in the mountains of Wyoming. They were poor. They had no horses. They walked everywhere. They lived in constant fear of their enemies. Then, sometime around 1680, a few Comanche warriors captured some horses. Then they captured more. Within 50 years, the Comanche had transformed from a struggling mountain tribe into the wealthiest, most powerful nation on the plains. Why? Because the horse was not just transportation, it was a technology, it was a weapon, it was a bank account. A Comanche warrior measured his wealth in horses. A man with 50 horses was a chief. A man with 200 horses was a king. But more importantly, the horse allowed the Comanche to do something no other North American tribe could do. They could travel enormous distances, strike without warning, and disappear before any enemy could organize a response. A Comanche war party might ride 300 miles, attack a settlement in Texas, capture 100 horses, and be back in their camps in Oklahoma before the Texas Rangers even knew they were gone. Speed, mobility, surprise. These were the 3 pillars of Comanche warfare, and the horse was the engine that powered them all. Let us talk about the Comanche warrior himself. What did he look like? What did he carry? Forget the Hollywood image of a feathered war bonnet. War bonnets were ceremonial, used by plains tribes like the Sioux and the Cheyenne. The Comanche preferred a simple leather headband with a single feather, or sometimes a cap made of otter fur. Their faces were painted for battle, red for war, black for death, white for mourning. They wore no armor. Armor was too heavy, too hot, and it slowed them down. A Comanche warrior believed that speed was his armor. His weapons were designed for mounted combat. The primary weapon was the short bow, about 3 feet long, made from the wood of the Osage orange tree or the heartwood of the cedar. This bow was small, but it was incredibly powerful. A Comanche bow could punch an arrow through a buffalo at 50 yards. It could shoot through a wooden shield. And most importantly, it could be fired from any position, sitting, standing, hanging off the side of a horse, or shooting backwards while fleeing. A skilled Comanche warrior could loose 10 arrows in the time it took a Spanish soldier to reload his musket. 10 arrows, each one aimed at a man's face or his horse's chest. That is not primitive warfare. That is a rate of fire that would not be matched by any military until the invention of the repeating rifle. The secondary weapon was the lance, a 12-foot pole with a steel blade used for charging into enemy formations. The lance was terrifying, but it was also a one-use weapon. Once you threw it or broke it, you had to fall back on your bow or your knife. Some Comanche warriors also carried a tomahawk, a metal axe head on a wooden handle, or a heavy club made of stone or iron. But the bow was king. The bow was what made the Comanche unbeatable for so long. Now we come to the horse. Not just any horse. A Comanche war horse was a trained athlete, a partner, and a weapon. The Comanche did not use saddles in the European style. They used a pad saddle, a leather cushion with stirrups made of wood or rawhide. Many warriors, especially young men, rode bareback. They controlled the horse with their knees, leaving their hands free for the bow. They trained their horses to respond to pressure, a slight lean to turn, a tap on the neck to speed up, a soft grunt to stop. The best war horses were mares, not stallions. Mares were quieter, more obedient, and less likely to whinny and betray a raiding party. A Comanche warrior loved his horse. He sang to it. He painted it with symbols for protection. He counted coup, touched an enemy with his hand or a stick from horseback to prove his bravery and his horsemanship. And when his horse died in battle, the warrior often died with it, because on the open plains, without a horse, you were a dead man. The Comanche understood this better than anyone. Let us talk about the culture that produced these warriors. Comanche boys were not raised to be farmers or merchants. They were raised to be raiders. From the age of 3, a Comanche boy was given a pony and taught to ride. By 5, he could shoot a small bow from horseback. By 10, he was hunting buffalo with the men. By 12, he was raiding enemy camps. By 14, if he had proven himself in battle, he could become a full warrior. The path to manhood was marked by war honors. The greatest honor was counting coup, touching a living enemy without killing him. It sounds strange, but it made sense. Killing an enemy was practical. Touching an enemy was spiritual. It proved that you were so brave, so fast, so skilled, that you could get close enough to touch a man who was trying to kill you, and then ride away. A warrior who counted coup 3 or 4 times was a legend. A warrior who counted coup 10 times was almost a god. Other war honors included stealing horses from an enemy camp, leading a successful war party, or dying in battle while protecting your comrades. Death in battle was not feared. It was celebrated. Comanche cosmology taught that warriors who died fighting went to a paradise of endless buffalo and beautiful horses. Why would you fear that? This belief made the Comanche nearly impossible to defeat psychologically. You could shoot them, but you could not frighten them. You could outnumber them, but you could not break their spirit. They were not fighting for money or land. They were fighting for honor, for their ancestors, and for a place in the sky. The Comanche war machine reached its peak in the early 19th century. By 1820, the Comanche controlled a vast territory called the Comancheria, a 250,000 square mile empire stretching from the Arkansas River in the north to the Rio Grande in the south. They demanded tribute from Spanish settlements, Mexican towns, and American traders. They raided deep into Mexico, stealing tens of thousands of horses and taking hundreds of captives. They fought the Apache, the Ute, the Pawnee, the Osage, and the Toccawa, and they beat them all. They fought the Spanish army, the Mexican army, and the Texas Rangers, and they beat them too. For nearly 2 centuries, no foreign power could project force into the Comancheria without Comanche permission. The Comanche were not just a tribe, they were a superpower. How did they do it? The answer is organization. The Comanche did not have a single chief or a central government. Instead, they had dozens of autonomous bands, each led by a peace chief and a war chief. The peace chief handled internal affairs, disputes, marriages, trade. The war chief led raiding parties and battles. Any man could become a war chief if he had enough war honors and if men would follow him. There was no conscription, no draft. Every Comanche warrior fought because he wanted to fight, and if he did not want to fight, he stayed home. This sounds chaotic, but it was actually brilliant. The Comanche war chiefs were the most capable, charismatic, and experienced warriors in the tribe. They had proven themselves in dozens of battles. Men followed them because they knew these leaders would bring them home alive, or if they died, they would die with honor. This system produced a warrior class that was self-selecting, highly motivated, and ruthlessly efficient. Compare that to a European army, where soldiers were often conscripted peasants who hated their officers and wanted only to survive. The Comanche had the ultimate advantage. They wanted to be there. Let us talk about tactics. A Comanche war party was small, rarely more than 50 warriors, often just 10 or 20. They rode in loose formation, spread out to avoid presenting a target. When they attacked, they did not charge in a straight line. They swarmed, they circled. They feinted, they drew the enemy out, then struck from the flanks. Their favorite tactic was the decoy. A few warriors would ride toward an enemy camp, looking like easy targets. The enemy would chase them. The decoys would ride away, just fast enough to stay ahead. And when the enemy was strung out, exhausted, and far from their camp, the main Comanche force would rise from a dry creek bed or a clump of trees and annihilate them. Another favorite tactic was the night raid. Comanche warriors could navigate by starlight. They could find their way to an enemy camp in complete darkness, cut the horses loose, and be gone before the first shot was fired. They did not need torches or lanterns. Their eyes were trained to see in the dark. Their horses were trained to walk silently. The night raid was not just a tactic, it was an art form, and no one practiced it better than the Comanche. Now we must address the hardest part of the Comanche story, the violence, the raids, the captives. The Comanche were not peaceful. They did not want to be peaceful. Their entire economy was based on raiding. They took captives for 2 reasons: to ransom them back for horses or goods, or to adopt them into the tribe. Many Comanche captives were treated well. They became family members, married into the tribe, and lived as Comanche. but many others were tortured. The Comanche believed that torture was a test of a warrior's spirit. If you could endure pain without crying out, you were worthy of respect. If you broke, you were weak. This is not comfortable for modern ears. But it was their culture, and we cannot understand Comanche war culture without understanding that they were, by our standards, brutal. They killed men, women, and children. They burned villages. They took scalps. They did these things not because they were monsters, but because they lived in a world where war was constant, resources were scarce, and mercy was often seen as weakness. The Spanish, the Mexicans, and the Americans did the same things. The difference is that the Comanche were better at it. For nearly 200 years, they were the best. The end of the Comanche came in the 1870s. The United States, after the Civil War, turned its full military might against the Plains tribes. The Texas Rangers adopted new tactics. They learned to fight like Comanche, using mounted rifles and hit-and-run raids. The U.S. Army introduced the Colt revolver and the Winchester repeating rifle, weapons that finally matched the Comanche bow in rate of fire. And most devastatingly, the U.S. Army killed the buffalo. By 1875, the great herds that had sustained the Comanche for centuries were gone. The Comanche could not eat grass, they could not ride horses that had no food. They surrendered. The last free Comanche war chief, Quanah, a man of Comanche and white blood, led his people to the reservation in 1875. He was not defeated in battle. He was starved out. The horse culture that had made the Comanche invincible was finally destroyed by railroads, barbed wire, and the extermination of the buffalo. But Quanah became a successful leader on the reservation. He adapted, he learned English, he became a rancher and a businessman. He proved that the Comanche spirit could survive even the loss of the horse. He died in 1911, a millionaire respected by whites and Indians alike. His last words were, "Tell the people that I have gone to the buffalo country." That is the Comanche. Even in defeat, they dreamed of the open plains. So what can we learn from the Comanche war culture? First, that true mastery requires total immersion. The Comanche did not learn to ride horses from a manual or a weekend course. They lived on horses from birth. Every muscle, every instinct, every waking thought was shaped by the horse. That is why they were unstoppable. Second, that culture is a weapon. The Comanche belief in honor, in counting coup, in death as a gateway to paradise, these beliefs made them fearless. Fearlessness is not about being strong. It is about believing that death is not the end. Third, that adaptation is survival. The Comanche adapted from mountain foot travelers to the greatest horse culture in history in just 2 generations. They adapted again on the reservation, learning to live in a world without buffalo. They are still adapting today. The Comanche Nation is alive, with over 17,000 enrolled members, a thriving language program, and an annual powwow that celebrates the old ways. The horses are gone. The plains are fenced. But the spirit of the Comanche warrior, the courage, the pride, the refusal to be broken, that spirit is still galloping across the Texas sky. Today, you can visit the Comanche National Museum in Lawton, Oklahoma. You can see the bows, the saddles, the war shirts. You can touch a piece of the history, but the real Comancheria is not in a museum. It is in the wind that blows across the Llano Estacado, the staked plains of West Texas. It is in the thunder of a Mustang herd running wild. It is in the memory of a people who looked at a horse and said, "This is my brother, this is my weapon, this is my home." The Comanche were born in the saddle. They lived in the saddle. And even now, long after the last war party rode over the horizon, they are still riding, not as ghosts, as ancestors. As the people who taught the world that a man and a horse, united in purpose, are unstoppable. That is the Comanche War Culture. Discipline, power, and the endless, beautiful, terrifying freedom of the open plain. Aho, let the story ride on.